The Strategy of Steel, 7 Mental Disciplines from History's Greatest Warriors. Introduction, the ultimate battle plan for your life. Every day you step onto a battlefield. It's not one of mud and steel, but of deadlines, demands, negotiations, and resistance. You face enemies, procrastination, self-doubt, fear, and you compete against rivals who want what's yours, the promotion, the deal, the victory. The truth is, most people lose the war of their own lives because they approach it with the wrong mindset. They focus on effort instead of strategy. They react instead of anticipate. They survive instead of dominate. For millennia, this fundamental difference has separated the defeated from the victorious, the forgotten from the legendary. This book is your access to the ultimate strategic blueprint, a curriculum forged not in an office, but on the crucible of history's most critical battlefields. We're talking about the minds that conquered the known world, united nomadic tribes, and faced overwhelming odds without unshakable resolve. We will dissect the minds of thinkers, leaders, and generals like Sun Tzu, who taught how to win without fighting, Alexander the Great, who redefined limits, and Miyamoto Musashi, who treated every breath as a path to mastery. This is not a history lesson. It is an operating manual for your own mind. In the next 7 chapters, you'll master the 7 mental disciplines from history's greatest warriors. These are the psychological systems they use to maintain clarity amid chaos, leverage superior preparation, and achieve victory before the first direct engagement even began. Are you ready to stop surviving and start commanding?
The time for reacting is over. The time for strategy is now.
Chapter 1. The Discipline of Detachment. Winning without fighting. The master strategist, Sun Tzu. The valley was silent except for the wind. Sun Tzu stood on the ridge, his hands clasped behind his back, watching 2 armies prepare for battle below. To his left, the forces of Chu, 30,000 men, their banners snapping in the morning air, drums beating a rhythm that promised blood. To his right, the smaller army of Wu, barely 15,000 strong, their formations tight, their faces grim. Any other general would have seen this as a disaster. Outnumbered 2 to 1, terrain favoring the enemy, morale uncertain. Sun Tzu saw something else entirely. He saw that the Chu commander was young, eager, hungry for glory. He saw that the Chu supply lines stretched too far, vulnerable to even a small disruption. He saw that the Chu soldiers had been marching for 3 days without proper rest, their discipline fraying at the edges. Most importantly, he saw that he didn't need to fight at all. By noon, Sun Tzu had sent a small detachment to intercept the Chu supply wagons. By evening, rumors had spread through the Chu camp that their provisions were destroyed, that reinforcements had been ambushed, that the Wu army was far larger than it appeared. By dawn the next day, the Chu army was in retreat. Not a single sword had been drawn, not a single life lost. Sun Tzu had won the battle before it began, not through strength, but through understanding, not through action, but through detachment. This is the first discipline, the ability to step back when everyone else is rushing forward. The principle, emotion, is the enemy of strategy. Sun Tzu understood something that most people never learn. The moment you become emotionally invested in a conflict, you've already lost half the battle. When you're angry, you make reckless decisions. When you're afraid, you hesitate. When you're desperate, you reveal your weaknesses. Your enemy doesn't need to defeat you. Your emotions do the work for them. Detachment is not coldness, it's not indifference. It's the ability to see clearly when everyone around you is blinded by feeling. Think about the last argument you had, at work, at home, with a friend. Did you win because you were right, or did you lose because you were reactive? Did you respond to what was actually happening, or to what you felt was happening? Most people operate from a place of constant reaction. Someone criticizes them, they defend. Someone challenges them, they attack. Someone ignores them, they chase. Sun Tzu would call this fighting from a position of weakness. Because when you react emotionally, you're no longer controlling the situation. The situation is controlling you. You've handed your opponent the map to your vulnerabilities. You've shown them exactly which buttons to push. Detachment is the discipline of creating space between stimulus and response. It's the ability to pause, assess, and choose your move rather than being forced into one. The modern battlefield, where detachment wins. Let's bring this into your world. Scenario 1, the workplace ambush. You're in a meeting. A colleague publicly questions your project, implying you've missed critical details. Everyone's eyes are on you. Your heart rate spikes. Your face flushes. You feel the urge to defend yourself immediately, to prove them wrong, to reassert your competence. This is the moment most people lose. Because if you react emotionally, if you get defensive, if you argue, if you try to justify yourself on the spot, you've confirmed their criticism. You've shown that you can be rattled. You've demonstrated that you're operating from insecurity rather than confidence. Sun Tzu would do something different. He would pause. He would acknowledge the question calmly. That's worth examining. He would promise to review the details and respond with a complete analysis. Then he would move on. What has he accomplished? He's refused to fight on terrain chosen by his opponent. He's maintained his composure. He's bought time to assess whether the criticism is valid or a power play. And most importantly, he's demonstrated that he cannot be provoked. By the time he responds, if he even needs to, he's already won. Because he responded from a position of strength, not reaction. Scenario 2, the relationship trap. Your partner says something hurtful during an argument. Your instinct is to strike back, to hurt them the way they hurt you, to escalate until someone apologizes or someone walks away. Every relationship graveyard is filled with couples who couldn't master detachment. Because in that moment, you have a choice. Do you want to win the argument, or do you want to solve the problem? Detachment allows you to see the difference. It allows you to recognize that your partner isn't your enemy. The conflict is. It allows you to step back and ask, what's actually happening here? What are they really saying beneath the words? What do we both actually want? Sun Tzu's wars weren't won through superior force. They were won through superior understanding, and you can't understand anything when you're drowning in emotion. Scenario 3, the financial crisis. The market crashes. Your investment portfolio drops 20% in a single day. Panic spreads. Everyone's selling. The news is predicting disaster. What do? Most people react. They sell at the bottom, locking in their losses because they can't tolerate the emotional discomfort of uncertainty. They let fear make their decisions. The detached strategist does something different. They step back. They assess whether the fundamentals have actually changed or whether this is temporary volatility. They recognize that panic is contagious but rarely rational. They remember that the best opportunities often appear when everyone else is running for the exits. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care about the outcome. It means you care more about making the right decision than about soothing your immediate anxiety. The practice? Building your detachment muscle. Sun Tzu didn't achieve detachment by accident. It was a discipline he cultivated through practice, observation, and relentless self-awareness. You can do the same. Exercise 1, the pause protocol. For the next week, practice this simple habit. When someone says or does something that triggers an emotional response in you, anger, defensiveness, anxiety, do not respond immediately. Count to 3, take a breath. Ask yourself, what is actually happening here separate from how I feel about it? This 3-second gap is where strategy lives. It's the space between being controlled by circumstances and choosing your response to them. Exercise 2, the observer's eye. Once a day, practice viewing yourself from the outside. Imagine you're Sun Tzu on that ridge, watching your own life unfold below. What patterns would you notice? Where are you being reactive instead of strategic? Where are you fighting battles that don't need to be fought? Where are you letting emotion drive decisions that should be driven by clarity? Write down what you observe, not as judgment, but as reconnaissance. You can't change what you can't see. Exercise 3, the outcome map. Before entering any potentially charged situation, a difficult conversation, a negotiation, a high-stakes meeting, ask yourself, what outcome do I actually want from this? Not what you want to say, not what you want to prove, what you want to achieve. Then ask, what's the most strategic path to that outcome? Often, you'll discover that the path your emotions are pushing you toward is the exact opposite of what will actually get you what you want. The wisdom, Sun Tzu's lessons on detachment. Sun Tzu's The Art of War is filled with insights about the power of detachment. Here are the principles that matter most. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Translation: the battles you don't have to fight are the ones you've already won. Detachment allows you to find the path of least resistance, the solution that achieves your goal without unnecessary conflict. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Translation: detachment creates the clarity to see both yourself and your opponent accurately. When you're emotional, you see distortions. When you're detached, you see truth. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. Translation: when everyone else is panicking, the detached strategist is calculating. Crisis reveals who has discipline and who operates purely on reaction. The wise warrior avoids the battle. Translation: your ego wants to fight every battle to prove itself. Your strategy knows that most battles aren't worth fighting. Detachment is knowing the difference. The integration, detachment in daily life. Detachment isn't something you practice once and master forever. It's a discipline you return to again and again in every situation where emotion threatens to override strategy. Here's what it looks like in practice. In conflict, you listen more than you speak. You seek to understand before you seek to be understood. You recognize that most arguments are about ego, not truth. In decision-making, you separate what you want to be true from what is true. You consult data, not just intuition. You acknowledge your biases instead of being controlled by them. In pressure, you breathe. You slow down. You remember that urgency is often manufactured, and the feeling that you must act now is usually the exact moment you should pause. In success, you don't get intoxicated by victory. You analyze what worked, what was luck, what can be replicated. You stay humble because you know the landscape is always shifting. In failure, you don't personalize defeat. You extract the lesson, adjust your strategy, and move forward. You understand that attachment to outcomes creates brittleness. Detachment creates resilience. The warning when detachment becomes avoidance. There's a shadow side to this discipline that must be acknowledged. Detachment can become a shield for cowardice. Some people use strategic detachment as an excuse to avoid confrontation entirely, to never commit to anything, to stay perpetually on the sidelines of their own life. That's not what Sun Tzu taught. He wasn't detached because he was afraid to engage. He was detached because he understood that true engagement requires clarity. He chose his battles carefully, but when he chose them, he committed fully. Detachment is not about caring less. It's about seeing more clearly so that you can care about the right things in the right way at the right time. The coward hides behind detachment. The strategist uses detachment to decide where to strike with precision. Know the difference. The victory before the battle. Sun Tzu spent his entire military career proving one point. The war is won or lost before the first sword is drawn. It's won in the preparation, in the intelligence gathering, in the understanding of terrain, weather, morale, and motivation, in the ability to see the battlefield as it actually is, not as you wish it to be or fear it might be. That clarity only comes from detachment. When you can step back from your emotions, you see opportunities others miss. You recognize traps before you fall into them. You understand that the person screaming the loudest is usually the one most afraid. You realize that half the battles you thought you needed to fight were never necessary at all. This is the first discipline because it's the foundation for all the others. Without detachment, strategy becomes impossible. Without detachment, you're just reacting, scrambling, hoping that effort will substitute for intelligence. It won't. Sun Tzu won his battles by refusing to be controlled by the chaos of war. You can win yours by refusing to be controlled by the chaos of emotion. The battlefield is waiting. The question is, will you rush in blindly, or will you stand on the ridge and see clearly? The choice, as always, is yours. but now you know what the masters knew. The war is won in the mind first and the world second. Chapter 2. The Discipline of Momentum. Strike when the iron is hot. The master strategist, Alexander the Great. The fortress of Tyre stood on an island, half a mile from the mainland, its walls rising 150 feet from the sea. For centuries, it had been considered impregnable. No army had ever taken it by force. Alexander the Great stood on the shore, 24 years old, his army behind him, and stared at those walls. His generals were practical men. They urged him to bypass Tyre, to leave it isolated and irrelevant while he continued his conquest of Persia. The siege would take months, maybe years. They had momentum. Why waste it on a single city? Alexander listened. Then he gave an order that seemed insane. "Build a causeway. We'll walk to them." For 7 months his army hauled stones, timber and earth into the sea. They built a road where no road had existed, a bridge to the impossible. The Tyrians laughed from their walls, launching attacks on the construction, sinking ships, killing workers. Alexander didn't stop. He didn't reconsider. He didn't pause to debate whether this was the smart move. He had decided, and once Alexander decided, he became an unstoppable force. When the causeway finally reached Tyre, when his siege towers rolled across his man-made land bridge, when his soldiers poured over those impregnable walls, the city that had never fallen fell. Not because Alexander had superior numbers, not because he had better weapons, but because he had something more powerful, absolute, unrelenting momentum. When Alexander moved, the world moved with him. And when the world tried to resist, he simply moved faster. This is the second discipline, the understanding that hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever will. The principle, momentum, is a weapon. Here's what most people don't understand about momentum. It's not just about speed. It's about inevitability. When you build true momentum, you create a psychological shift, both in yourself and in your opposition. You stop questioning whether something is possible and start focusing purely on execution. Your enemies stop asking if you can be stopped and start scrambling to figure out how. Alexander conquered most of the known world by the age of 30. Not because he was the smartest general, not because he had the largest army, but because he understood that momentum creates its own advantages. When you're in motion, opportunities appear that don't exist when you're standing still. Doors open, resources materialize. People rally to your cause because success is magnetic and everyone wants to be part of something that's already moving. But here's the crucial part. Momentum must be initiated. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen through careful planning alone. It happens when you make a decision and commit to it with such intensity that reversing course becomes unthinkable. Think about Alexander building that causeway. Every day for 7 months, his soldiers moved stones. Some days they made progress. Some days the sea destroyed their work. Some days men died. At any point he could have stopped. He could have said, "This isn't working." He could have listened to the voices saying it was impossible. But momentum doesn't come from doing what's easy. It comes from deciding that stopping is not an option. The modern battlefield, where momentum wins. Let's talk about where you're bleeding momentum right now. Scenario 1, the side project that never launches. You've had this idea for months, maybe years. A business, a creative project, a career shift. You've done the research. You've made the plans. You've told yourself you'll start when the time is right. The time is never right, because here's what happens without momentum. Every day you don't start is a day your belief in the idea weakens. Every week that passes, new doubts emerge. Every month, the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels more insurmountable. You're not failing because the idea is bad. You're failing because you never built the causeway. Alexander didn't wait for perfect conditions to attack Tyre. He didn't wait until he had a better strategy or more resources or unanimous support from his generals. He started. And the act of starting, the visible, undeniable commitment, created its own reality. Your side project doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be in motion. Launch the bad website. Write the messy first chapter. Have the awkward initial conversation. Post the imperfect video. Because once you start, momentum takes over. Each small action makes the next one easier. Each bit of progress generates energy for the next step. Each public commitment closes off the retreat route. Alexander's causeway wasn't impressive on day 1. It was just a pile of rocks in the sea. But on day 2, it was bigger. Day 10, bigger still. Day 100, it was undeniable. Your causeway is built the same way, one stone at a time, with absolute refusal to stop. Scenario 2, the conversation you keep avoiding. There's a conversation you need to have with your boss about a promotion, with your partner about a problem, with a client about a missed deadline, with yourself about a change that's overdue. You keep putting it off, waiting for the right moment, the right words, the right mood. Meanwhile, the silence is making everything worse. The issue is growing. The resentment is building. The opportunity is slipping away. Momentum in communication means this: say the thing now. Not perfectly, not with the ideal phrasing, not when you've rehearsed every possible response. Now, today, this morning. Because here's what happens when you initiate difficult conversations with momentum. The other person respects your directness. The issue gets addressed before it becomes a crisis. You discover that the fear of the conversation was worse than the conversation itself. And even if the conversation goes badly, even if it's uncomfortable or leads to conflict, you're still better off than you were in paralysis. Because momentum means you're moving through problems instead of being stuck in them. Alexander didn't negotiate with Tyre. He didn't send envoys to discuss terms while privately hoping he wouldn't have to follow through. He started building the causeway in full view of everyone. The action itself was the message. I'm coming. Prepare or don't, but I'm coming. What conversation are you avoiding that needs that same energy? Scenario 3, the career plateau. You've been in the same role for 3 years. You're good at it, comfortable. But you're not growing. You're not challenged. You're not excited. You tell yourself you're being patient, strategic, waiting for the right opportunity to present itself. But opportunities don't present themselves to people standing still. They present themselves to people in motion. Alexander could have consolidated his holdings in Macedonia, could have been a competent regional king, could have lived a long, comfortable, forgettable life. Instead, he crossed into Asia, then Persia, then Egypt, then India. Each conquest created momentum for the next. Each victory attracted more soldiers, more resources, more legends. He didn't become Alexander the Great by waiting for greatness to find him. He became great by moving toward it relentlessly. Your career momentum works the same way. You don't get promoted by doing your current job well. You get promoted by demonstrating that you're already operating at the next level. You don't get recruited for better opportunities by keeping your head down. You get recruited by being visible, by building, by showing results that are impossible to ignore. Start the project your boss didn't ask for. Learn the skill your industry is moving toward. Network with people 2 levels above you. Apply for the position you're not quite ready for. Build your causeway, publicly, undeniably, with commitment that makes retreat impossible. The practice, building unstoppable momentum. Alexander didn't wake up with momentum. He created it through specific practices and principles. You can do the same. Exercise 1, the first stone. Right now, identify the one project, goal, or change you've been postponing. Not the easiest one, the one that matters. Today, not tomorrow, not Monday, not after you've planned more. Take one concrete, visible action toward it. Email someone, buy the domain, book the flight, write the first paragraph, make the phone call. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. It matters that it's real, that it exists outside your head, that it's a stone in the water, the beginning of your causeway. The first stone is the hardest because it requires you to move from intention to action, but it's also the most powerful because it transforms everything from theoretical to actual. Exercise 2, the daily advance. Momentum dies in gaps. Miss one day, and it's easier to miss 2. Miss a week, and you're back at 0. Alexander's army moved every day. Even if it was just a mile, even if conditions were terrible, even if they were tired. The march continued. Commit to one small action every single day on your primary goal. 15 minutes, one task, one conversation, but every day, without exception, for 30 days. This isn't about massive progress. It's about creating a rhythm that becomes automatic. It's about proving to yourself that you're the kind of person who doesn't stop. It's about building momentum that becomes self-sustaining. Exercise 3, the public commitment. Alexander announced his plans. He told his army they were going to conquer Persia. He told the world he was crossing into Asia. He made retreat psychologically impossible. You need to do the same. Tell someone what you're building. Post about your goal publicly. Set a deadline and announce it. Create accountability that makes backing out uncomfortable. This feels risky, because it is. You're exposing yourself to potential failure, but that's exactly why it works. When stopping becomes harder than continuing, momentum takes over. The fear of public failure is powerful. Use it. Let it push you forward when motivation fades. The wisdom, Alexander's lessons on momentum. Alexander's life was short. He died at 32. But the lessons he left about momentum are eternal. There is nothing impossible to him who will try. Translation. Impossibility is usually just untested. Most barriers exist in the mind first. Momentum destroys them by refusing to acknowledge them. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Translation. Momentum is contagious. When you move with conviction, others follow. Your energy determines the energy of everyone around you. Remember, upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. Translation. Every action you take either builds momentum or breaks it. There are no neutral days. You're either moving forward or sliding back. The end and object of conquest is to avoid doing the same thing as the conquered. Translation. Don't copy the people standing still. Don't adopt the habits of the comfortable and stagnant. To win, you must move differently than those who are losing. Momentum isn't reserved for conquering empires. It's available in every area of your life right now. In your work, you don't wait for permission to innovate. You don't wait for perfect information to make decisions. You bias toward action. You ship, iterate, improve. You understand that done is better than perfect, and moving is better than planning. In your relationships, you don't let issues fester. You don't avoid difficult conversations. You address problems when they're small. You show up consistently. You understand that neglect creates decay and attention creates momentum. In your health, you don't start a fitness plan on Monday. You don't wait until you're motivated. You start today, right now, with whatever you can do. You understand that the workout you do is infinitely better than the perfect workout you don't. In your learning, you don't wait until you have time to really focus. You learn in fragments. You read for 15 minutes. You practice for 20. You understand that daily progress compounds and momentum in learning creates expertise faster than intensity without consistency. In your finances, you don't wait until you're making enough to invest. You start with whatever you have. You automate your savings. You make momentum your strategy. You understand that the habit of building wealth matters more than the amount you start with. The warning, when momentum becomes recklessness. Alexander's greatest strength was also his fatal flaw. He died at 32, far from home, pushing into India when his army was exhausted and his supply lines were stretched to breaking. His momentum carried him too far. His refusal to stop eventually stopped him permanently. There's a difference between momentum and recklessness, between commitment and foolishness, between persistence and stubbornness. Momentum means moving forward with purpose. Recklessness means moving forward without awareness. The questions you must ask. Am I moving towards something valuable, or am I just moving to avoid stopping? Is my momentum serving my actual goals, or has momentum itself become the goal? Am I building something sustainable, or am I burning resources I can't replace? Alexander built a causeway to Tyre because taking Tyre was strategically essential. If he'd built causeways to every island because he'd developed an obsession with causeway building, that would be madness. Know the difference. Momentum is a tool. Use it wisely. Point it at targets that matter. And remember, the goal isn't to move forever, it's to move until you win. The causeway you're building. Right now, in this moment, you're either building a causeway or you're standing on the shore explaining why it can't be done. The world is full of people with reasons why things are impossible, why the timing isn't right, why the resources aren't sufficient, why the obstacles are too great. Alexander looked at the same facts everyone else saw. The island fortress, the distance, the fortifications, the history of failed sieges. And then he started moving rocks. That's the discipline of momentum. Not believing that everything will work out. Not having a perfect plan. Not waiting for confidence or clarity or ideal conditions. Just starting, then not stopping. The person you want to become is on the other side of sustained action. The life you want to live is on the other side of momentum. The impact you want to make is on the other side of that first stone in the water. Your causeway won't be impressive on day one, it'll just be a decision and a single action. But if you add to it every day, if you refuse to stop, refuse to retreat, refuse to listen to the voices saying it's impossible, you'll look up one day and discover you've built a path to the impossible. Alexander didn't conquer the world because he was the strongest. He conquered it because once he started moving, nothing could make him stop. What are you building, and more importantly, have you started? The clock is ticking, momentum is waiting, but it won't wait forever. Chapter 3. The Discipline of Timing. The Space Between Heartbeats. The master strategist, Miyamoto Musashi. The beach at Ganryu Island was empty when Kojiro arrived. He was early, deliberately so. Kojiro was Japan's most celebrated swordsman, undefeated in over 60 duels, famous for his swallow-cut technique that could strike a bird mid-flight. He wore his finest robes. His sword gleamed in the morning sun. His students lined the shore, waiting to witness their master's inevitable victory. The opponent he was waiting for was Miyamoto Musashi, a ronin with a growing reputation, but nothing approaching Kojiro's legend. They had agreed to meet at dawn on this isolated island, single combat, to the death. Dawn came, Musashi did not. An hour passed, then 2. Kojiro paced the beach, his irritation growing. His students muttered among themselves. Was Musashi afraid? Had he fled? 3 hours after the agreed time, a boat appeared on the horizon. It moved slowly, almost lazily, across the water. When it finally reached the shore, Miyamoto Musashi stepped out. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were simple, almost crude. And his sword was not a sword at all, but a wooden oar he had carved from the boat during the crossing. Kojiro exploded with rage. "You're late, and you dare face me with that." Musashi looked at him calmly, a slight smile on his lips. "I apologize for the delay," he said quietly, "but I'm here now." What Kojiro didn't understand, what he couldn't see through his anger, was that he had already lost. Musashi had not been late by accident. He had not shown up with a wooden sword because he lacked a proper blade. Every detail had been calculated, every moment choreographed to produce one specific outcome: to make Kojiro angry, impatient, off balance. The duel lasted less than a minute. Kojiro drew his legendary sword with furious speed, his technique perfect, his killing blow already in motion. But he was fighting from emotion now, from wounded pride, from 3 hours of mounting frustration. Musashi moved with perfect calm. He sidestepped the attack by a hair's breadth. His wooden sword struck Kojiro's skull with precision. One blow, one moment, one perfectly timed action. Kojiro fell to the sand, dead before his famous sword completed its arc. Musashi bowed to the fallen swordsman, returned to his boat, and left the island without a word. He had not won because he was faster. He had not won because his weapon was superior. He had won because he understood something profound. The perfect action at the perfect moment defeats any amount of skill applied at the wrong time. This is the third discipline. Timing is not about speed, it's about precision. The principle, perfect timing multiplies power. Most people confuse timing with speed. They think being fast is the same as being timely. It's not. Speed is about how quickly you can act. Timing is about when to act. And the difference between the two is the difference between frantic motion and devastating impact. Musashi could have arrived early, could have engaged Kojiro when both were fresh and focused. It would have been a fair fight between two masters. Maybe Musashi would have won, maybe not. But Musashi wasn't interested in a fair fight. He was interested in winning, and he understood that the same action executed at different moments produces wildly different results. Strike too early, and your opponent is prepared. Strike too late, and the opportunity has passed. Strike at the exact moment when their guard is down, when their mind is elsewhere, when their balance is compromised, and you don't need to be the strongest or the fastest. You just need to be timely. This is true in swordplay. It's also true in every other domain of life. The right word at the wrong moment falls flat. The right investment at the wrong time loses money. The right move in a relationship at the wrong moment creates distance instead of connection. But the perfect moment, that space between heartbeats where everything aligns, can change everything. The question is, how do you recognize it, and how do you train yourself to act within it? The modern battlefield, where timing wins. Let's examine where timing separates winners from losers in your daily life. Scenario 1, the negotiation. You're negotiating a salary, a contract, a deal. You've done your research. You know your value. You know what you want to ask for. But when do you make your ask? Most people do it too early, before they've established their value, before the other party is invested, or too late, after terms have already been discussed and anchored at a lower number. The master of timing waits. They let the conversation develop. They listen for the moment when the other party reveals their need, their constraints, their urgency. They wait until they've demonstrated value so clearly that saying no becomes difficult. Then and only then they make their move. Musashi arrived late not because he was disorganized. He arrived late because he understood that Kojiro's frustration was a weapon he could use against him. That those 3 hours of waiting would unravel Kojiro's discipline more effectively than any sword technique. Your negotiation works the same way. Sometimes the most powerful move is to wait, to let the other party's impatience work in your favor, to let them fill the silence with concessions. But you have to recognize that moment. You have to be present enough, patient enough, disciplined enough to see it when it arrives. Because if you act too early out of nervousness, you lose leverage. And if you wait too long out of fear, the window closes. Timing is the space between those two mistakes. Scenario 2, the relationship moment. There's something you need to say to someone you care about. An apology, a confession, a declaration, a difficult truth. You've thought about it for weeks. You've rehearsed the words. You know it needs to be said. But every time you get close, the moment doesn't feel right. They're distracted. You're both tired. The setting is wrong. So you wait. And wait, and wait. Here's what Musashi would tell you. There is no perfect moment. There is only the moment you create. Musashi didn't wait for Kojiro to be calm and centered. He created the conditions, the frustration, the imbalance, the emotional vulnerability that made his victory possible. You cannot wait for your partner to be in the perfect mood to hear difficult news. You cannot wait for your friend to be maximally receptive to your apology. You cannot wait for all external conditions to align. But you can create the space. You can say, I need to talk to you about something important. Can we find 30 minutes tonight? You can acknowledge the difficulty of what you're about to share. You can choose a private setting, a moment of relative calm, a time when neither of you is rushed. Then you act, not perfectly, not with ideal conditions, but with intention. Because the alternative, indefinite postponement, is not better timing. It's avoiding timing altogether. And in relationships, avoided conversations don't disappear. They metastasize. Musashi's timing wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It was about recognizing when his opponent was most vulnerable and acting in that window. Your relationships require the same awareness, the same willingness to act when the moment is right, even if it's not comfortable. Scenario 3, the career move. You've been building skills, networking, positioning yourself for a bigger opportunity. You're ready, or at least you're as ready as you're going to be. But when do you make your move? When do you ask for the promotion? When do you launch the business? When do you leave the secure job for the uncertain venture? Too early, and you're unprepared. Too late, and someone else takes the opportunity. Musashi spent years wandering Japan, training, fighting smaller duels, building his reputation before he faced Kojiro. He didn't rush into the legendary duel before he was ready, but he also didn't wait until he was absolutely certain of victory. He moved when the opportunity was ripe, when Kojiro's reputation was at its peak, when defeating him would mean something, when the risk was high but the potential reward was higher. Your career timing works the same way. You're watching for signals. The company is growing. Your manager is asking you to take on more responsibility. The market conditions favor your industry. You've developed leverage through unique skills or relationships. You're also watching internal signals. You've outgrown your current role. You've built financial runway. You've tested your business idea enough to know it has traction. When both align, when external opportunity meets internal readiness, that's your moment. But here's the crucial part. You will never feel completely ready. There will always be one more skill to develop, one more dollar to save, one more connection to make. Musashi didn't wait until he was certain he could defeat Kojiro. He waited until the conditions favored his victory, and then he acted decisively. The same is true for you. You're not waiting for certainty. You're waiting for favorable conditions, and when they appear, you must be ready to move. The practice, developing your sense of timing. Timing is not an innate gift. It's a skill Musashi developed through decades of practice, observation, and ruthless self-awareness. You can develop it too. Exercise 1. The pause and observe. For 1 week, practice this. In every conversation, every meeting, every interaction, pause before you speak or act. Not a long pause, just a breath. Just long enough to observe the room. What's the energy? What's the other person's state? Are they open or defensive, rushed or relaxed, ready to hear what you have to say, or still processing something else? Most people are so focused on what they want to say that they never notice when to say it. They barrel forward regardless of whether the other person is ready to receive it. The pause creates space for observation, and observation creates the awareness necessary for timing. Exercise 2. The Pattern Recognition Journal. At the end of each day, write down one moment where timing mattered. Maybe you sent an email right before your boss went into a bad meeting and it got lost. Maybe you called a friend right when they needed to hear from you. Maybe you made a joke that landed perfectly because everyone was already laughing. Note what made the timing good or bad. What signals were you paying attention to? What signals did you miss? Over time, you'll start recognizing patterns. You'll notice that certain types of requests work better in the morning than the afternoon. That difficult conversations go better when you're both well rested. That your ideas get more traction when you present them after someone else's idea has been rejected. These patterns are your training ground. They're teaching you to read the subtle rhythms of life, the same way Musashi learned to read the subtle rhythms of combat. Exercise 3. The deliberate delay. Identify one thing you're rushing toward right now, a decision, a conversation, an action. Deliberately delay it by 1 week. Not because you're procrastinating, but because you're observing. You're asking, what additional information might appear in the next 7 days? What might change about the situation? What might I learn about the other person's state, needs, or readiness? Sometimes waiting reveals that the action wasn't necessary at all. Sometimes it reveals a better approach. Sometimes it simply creates space for conditions to improve. Musashi could have fought Kojiro immediately upon challenge. Instead, he agreed to meet at Ganryu Island, and then used the travel time to prepare psychologically, to carve his wooden sword, to visualize the encounter. That delay wasn't weakness, it was strategy. What are you rushing toward that might benefit from strategic delay? The wisdom, Musashi's lessons on timing. Musashi's writings, particularly the Book of 5 Rings, are filled with insights about timing. Here are the principles that matter most. The primary thing when you take a sword in your hands is your intention to cut the enemy, whatever the means. Translation. Timing without intent is useless. You must know what you're trying to accomplish before you can determine when to act. Clarity of purpose guides timing. You can only fight the way you practice. Translation. Timing in the moment is the result of awareness built over time. You can't suddenly develop timing in a crisis if you've never practiced it in calm. Train when the stakes are low, so you're ready when they're high. Perceive that which cannot be seen with the eye. Translation. Timing requires reading subtlety, body language, energy shifts, unspoken dynamics. Most people only see the obvious. Masters of timing see what's beneath the surface. In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close and to take a distanced view of close things. Translation. Perspective affects timing. Sometimes you're too close to see the right moment. Sometimes you're too detached. You must be able to shift between both views. The integration, timing in daily life. Timing is available to you in every domain, every day. Here's what it looks like in practice. In your communication. You don't just say the right thing. You say it when the other person is ready to hear it. You notice when someone is defensive and you wait. You notice when they're open and you lean in. You understand that the same words at different moments create different realities. In your creativity, you don't force the work when inspiration is absent. But you also don't wait for perfect inspiration before you start. You recognize the rhythm of your own creative energy, and you work with it instead of against it. You know when to push and when to rest. In your investments, you don't buy at the peak because everyone else is buying. You don't sell at the bottom because everyone else is panicking. You develop the patience to wait for undervaluation and the courage to act when others are fearful. You understand that markets have rhythms and timing captures value that analysis alone cannot. In your leadership, you don't give feedback immediately when you're angry. You wait until you're calm, but not so long that the moment has passed. You recognize when your team needs encouragement versus accountability. You sense when to push for more and when to acknowledge that people need rest. In your conflicts, you don't engage every provocation. You wait for the moment when engaging will actually resolve something rather than escalate it. You understand that some arguments need to happen, but timing determines whether they're productive or destructive. The warning, when patience becomes paralysis. Musashi's discipline of timing was profound, but it had limits. There's a danger in becoming so obsessed with perfect timing that you never act at all. Some people use waiting for the right time as an excuse for indefinite inaction. They're not developing timing, they're avoiding risk. They're not being strategic, they're being fearful. The difference is this: strategic timing is active waiting. You're observing, preparing, positioning. You're ready to act the moment conditions align. Paralysis is passive waiting. You're hoping the universe will make the decision for you. You're hoping the opportunity will become so obvious that acting requires no courage. Musashi didn't wait for Kojiro to become easier to defeat. He waited for the moment when his specific approach, arriving late, using psychological warfare, fighting with an unconventional weapon, would be most effective. That's strategic timing. If you find yourself waiting forever, ask, am I waiting for better conditions, or am I waiting for certainty? Because certainty rarely comes. Favorable conditions do, but you have to be paying attention to recognize them. And once you recognize them, you must act decisively, completely. With the same commitment Musashi showed when his wooden sword met Kojiro's skull. The space between heartbeats. There's a concept in martial arts called ma-ai, the critical distance between opponents where a single move determines life or death. Too far, and your attack falls short. Too close, and you have no room to maneuver. Timing lives in that same space. Not too early, not too late. In the precise moment where action becomes inevitable, where resistance collapses, where victory crystallizes from possibility into reality. Musashi built his entire philosophy around recognizing and acting within that space. He called it the rhythm of the void, that moment of stillness before the storm, where everything is about to change and you are the force that changes it. You experience this space more often than you realize. It's there when you're in a conversation and you suddenly know that this is the moment to ask for what you want. It's there when you're considering an investment and every analysis says yes, but your gut says wait. It's there when you wake up one morning and realize that today is the day you finally quit, or propose, or launch, or walk away. The question is, do you trust it? Do you act on it? Or do you let the moment pass, telling yourself you'll catch the next one? Musashi understood that most of life's decisive moments don't announce themselves with trumpets. They whisper. They appear in the space between heartbeats. And if you're not paying attention, if you're too busy planning or worrying or hesitating, they disappear forever. Your discipline is to develop the awareness to recognize these moments, and the courage to act within them, not recklessly, not impulsively, but with the precision of a sword strike that has been practiced 10,000 times and executed once. The duel you're fighting. Right now, you're facing your own version of Kojiro. Maybe it's a competitor. Maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe it's an internal battle between the person you are and the person you're becoming. And the question facing you is the same one Musashi faced on that beach. When do you strike? Do you rush in immediately, relying on effort and intensity? Do you wait indefinitely, hoping for perfect conditions? Or do you do what Musashi did? Observe, prepare, and then act with perfect timing when the moment reveals itself. The master swordsman doesn't win because he's always attacking. He wins because when he does attack, it's at the exact moment when his opponent cannot defend. One strike, one moment, one perfectly timed action. That's the discipline of timing. And it's available to you right now, in whatever challenge you're facing. You just have to stop, breathe, observe, and wait for the space between heartbeats. When it comes, and it will come, you'll know. And in that moment, you must be ready to move. Not tomorrow. Not after more planning. Not when you feel more confident. Now, because timing is not about when you're ready. It's about when the world is. Chapter 4, The Discipline of Adaptation, The Way of Water. The master strategist, Sun Tzu. The terrain was wrong. Sun Tzu's scouts had reported that the valley ahead offered clear passage for his army, flat ground, good visibility, a direct route to their objective. His generals were eager to proceed. They'd been marching for days, and this valley represented the fastest path forward. But when Sun Tzu himself surveyed the land, he saw something different. The valley was indeed flat and open, but the hills on either side were covered in dense forest. The river that ran through the center was low now, in summer, but the banks showed signs of seasonal flooding. And most importantly, the wind was blowing from the north, which meant smoke from campfires would drift directly toward enemy positions. His generals saw opportunity. Sun Tzu saw a trap. "We're not going through the valley," he announced. His commanders protested. The alternate route would add 3 days to their march. They would lose the element of speed. The men were tired. Sun Tzu listened to their concerns. Then he said something that would become central to his philosophy. The army that adapts to changing conditions is the army that survives. The army that insists on its original plan is the army that dies. They took the longer route. 2 days later, scouts reported that an enemy force had indeed been lying in ambush in that valley, hidden in the forests on the hillsides, waiting for Sun Tzu's army to march into their killing zone. The trap had been perfect, except there was no one there to spring it. Sun Tzu's army reached their destination unscathed, while the enemy wasted days in position, slowly realizing their prey had found another path entirely. Sun Tzu hadn't won through force. He'd won through adaptation. He'd changed his plan when the conditions changed. And that flexibility, that willingness to abandon the original strategy when reality demanded it, had saved his entire army. This is the fourth discipline. Rigidity is a liability. Adaptation is strength. The principle, the plan, is not the territory. Here's a truth most people resist. The plan you start with is never the plan that succeeds. Because plans are built on assumptions, and assumptions are built on incomplete information. And the moment your plan meets reality, reality wins. Every time. The question is not whether you'll need to adapt. The question is whether you'll be able to recognize when adaptation is necessary and whether you'll have the courage to do it. Most people cling to their original plan like it's a life raft. They've invested time in it, they've told people about it, they've committed to it emotionally. So when conditions change, when new information emerges, when reality suggests a different path, they double down. They march into the valley because that's what they said they would do, and they die there because they confused commitment with stubbornness. Sun Tzu understood something profound. Strategy is not about following a plan. It's about achieving an objective. And if the path to that objective changes, the strategy must change with it. Water doesn't insist on flowing in a straight line. It finds the path of least resistance. It adapts to the terrain. It flows around obstacles. It changes form when necessary, liquid, ice, vapor, whatever the conditions require. And yet it always eventually reaches the sea. That's the discipline of adaptation. Not abandoning your objective, but being willing to change your approach as many times as necessary to reach it. The modern battlefield where adaptation wins. Let's examine where your inability to adapt is costing you right now. Scenario 1. The business plan that reality rejected. You launched the product, you did the research, you validated the idea, you built exactly what you planned to build, and the market said no, not because your product was bad, but because the market wanted something slightly different. A different price point, a different feature set, a different positioning. This is the moment where most businesses die, not because they couldn't build what they planned, but because they couldn't adapt to what the market actually wanted. Sun Tzu would look at this situation and ask one question: what is your objective? If your objective is to build exactly the product you originally envisioned, then you're committed to the plan, not the outcome, and you'll fail. If your objective is to build a successful business that serves customers and generates revenue, then the product is just a tactic, and tactics can change. The companies that survive are the ones that listen to the market and adapt. They pivot, they iterate, they release version 2.0 that looks nothing like version 1.0 because they let reality inform their strategy. Your ego wants to prove the original plan was right. Your strategy needs to prove you can win, regardless of whether it looks like what you originally envisioned. What business plan are you clinging to that reality is telling you to abandon? Scenario 2. The relationship that changed. You met someone, you fell in love. You built a vision of your life together. Marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs, Sunday dinners with both families. Then, 5 years in, they tell you they don't want kids, or they get a job offer across the country, or they realize they're not ready for marriage, or they come out as gay. The vision you had, the plan you built, is no longer viable. This is where many relationships end, not because the love is gone, but because one or both people cannot adapt to the new reality. They're so attached to the original plan that they can't envision a different path forward. Sun Tzu would ask, what is your objective? If your objective is to execute the exact relationship plan you originally imagined, then any deviation is failure, and the relationship is over. If your objective is to build a meaningful life with this person, whoever they're becoming, whatever shape that life takes, then everything else is negotiable. Maybe you don't have kids, but you mentor. Maybe you move across the country and build a new community. Maybe marriage looks different than you imagined, but commitment remains. Adaptation in relationships means loving the person who actually exists, not the person you planned for them to be. It means building the life you can actually create together, not mourning the life that was never going to happen. What relationship are you trying to force into a shape it cannot take? Scenario 3. The career path that dead-ended. You had a plan. You'd work your way up in your industry, put in your time, climb the ladder, retire with a pension and a gold watch. Then the industry changed, the technology shifted, the company downsized, the ladder you were climbing disappeared. You have two choices. Insist the ladder should still be there or find a different way up. Most people spend years in denial, trying to resurrect careers that the market has already killed. They go back to school for credentials that no longer matter. They apply for positions that no longer exist. They optimize for a game that's no longer being played. Sun Tzu would abandon that valley and find another route. He would ask, "What is your objective? Is it to work in this specific industry, in this specific role, climbing this specific ladder? Or is it to build financial security, contribute meaningful work and feel fulfilled?" If it's the latter, the industry is just a tactic, the role is just a tactic, the ladder is just one of many possible paths. Adaptation means being willing to learn new skills when your old skills become obsolete. It means pivoting to industries you never considered. It means building a portfolio career instead of a linear climb. It means recognizing that the world changed and you need to change with it. What career path are you mourning instead of adapting beyond? The practice, building your adaptation muscle. Sun Tzu didn't develop the ability to adapt overnight. It was a discipline he cultivated through constant awareness, ruthless honesty, and willingness to change course. You can develop the same capacity. Exercise 1, the reality check. Once a week, take inventory of one major project, goal, or plan you're currently executing. Ask 3 questions. 1. What assumptions did I make when I started this? 2. Which of those assumptions have proven false? 3. What would I do differently if I started today with what I now know? Most people never ask these questions because they're afraid of the answers. They've invested too much to change course. They've told too many people about their plan. They're committed. But commitment to the wrong plan is not noble. It's foolish. Sun Tzu survived because he was constantly reassessing. Is this terrain still favorable? Is this strategy still sound? Are conditions still what I believed them to be? The moment the answer was no, he adapted, not eventually, immediately. Exercise 2, the contingency builder. For every major plan you make, create 3 versions. Plan A, the ideal scenario. Plan B, if X goes wrong. Plan C, if everything goes wrong. Most people only make Plan A. Then when reality deviates, and it always does, they're paralyzed. They don't know what to do because they never imagined needing to do anything else. Sun Tzu always had contingencies, multiple routes, alternative strategies. He wasn't surprised when conditions changed because he'd already wargamed the possibilities. You should do the same, not because you're pessimistic, but because you're prepared. And preparation creates the mental flexibility to adapt quickly when necessary. Exercise 3, the kill your darling practice. Identify one thing you're currently doing that's not working. Not something small, something significant. A project, a relationship dynamic, a business strategy, a career path. Now ask, if I was starting today, would I choose this path? If the answer is no, you've found something that needs to be adapted or abandoned, but you're continuing it anyway because of sunk cost, ego, or fear of change. Sun Tzu would abandon it immediately. He wouldn't march into the valley just because he'd already started walking that direction. The ability to kill your darlings, to let go of plans, projects, and paths that are no longer serving you, is the essence of adaptation. And it's one of the hardest disciplines to master because it requires admitting you were wrong. But Sun Tzu never cared about being right, he cared about winning. And sometimes winning means having the wisdom to retreat, regroup, and find another way. The wisdom, Sun Tzu's lessons on adaptation. Sun Tzu's Art of War contains profound insights about the necessity of adaptation. Here are the principles that matter most. All warfare is based on deception, but the greatest deception is to make your enemy think you are bound by your own plans. Translation: flexibility is a weapon. When your opponent believes you're committed to a specific course of action, you gain an advantage by being willing to change. They prepare for the wrong fight. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby you can be the director of the opponent's fate. Translation: the less attached you are to a specific form or approach, the harder you are to counter. Adaptation creates unpredictability. Unpredictability creates advantage. Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe he is facing. Translation: there is no universal strategy. Every situation is unique. Your ability to adapt to the specific terrain, the specific opponent, the specific conditions determines your success. The wise warrior avoids the battle that costs more than it gains. Translation: sometimes adaptation means choosing not to fight at all. Not every mountain needs to be climbed. Not every battle needs to be won. Wisdom is knowing when to change objectives entirely. The integration, adaptation in daily life. Adaptation isn't reserved for military strategy. It's available to you in every area of your life, every single day. In your work, you don't cling to processes that no longer work. You don't defend the way we've always done it when a better way emerges. You experiment, measure results, and adapt based on data rather than attachment. In your learning, you don't force yourself to learn in a style that doesn't suit you. You try different approaches, reading, listening, doing, teaching, and adapt to what actually helps you retain information. In your health, you don't stick with a diet that makes you miserable or an exercise routine that injures you. You listen to your body, adapt to what works for your specific physiology, and adjust as you age and circumstances change. In your parenting, you don't raise your second child the same way you raised your first because they're different people. You adapt to their temperament, their needs, their learning style. You recognize that the rules that worked for a 7-year-old don't work for a teenager. In your communication, you don't use the same approach with everyone. You adapt to whether someone needs directness or gentleness, logic or emotion, space or presence. You read the person and adjust accordingly. The warning: when adaptation becomes aimlessness. There's a danger in overvaluing adaptation. You can become so flexible that you have no spine, so willing to change that you stand for nothing, so adaptable that you drift wherever the current takes you. Sun Tzu was flexible in his tactics, but unwavering in his objective. He would change his route, his timing, his approach, but he never changed his commitment to victory. That's the crucial distinction. Adapt your methods. Never compromise your values or abandon your objectives. If you find yourself constantly changing direction, never finishing what you start, always pivoting to the next shiny opportunity, that's not adaptation. That's lack of commitment.
Adaptation is adjusting your approach when conditions change. Aimlessness is having no clear objective to begin with.
Know the difference. Be water in your tactics. Be stone in your purpose. The river that moves mountains. Water seems weak, soft, yielding. It has no shape of its own. It cannot stand on its own. And yet, given enough time, water carves canyons through solid rock. It shapes coastlines. It moves mountains. Chapter 5. The Discipline of Focus. One target, one strike. The master strategist, Miyamoto Musashi. The duel was supposed to be simple. Musashi had been challenged by a skilled samurai from a rival school, a man who fought with 2 swords simultaneously, a technique that was becoming fashionable among warriors seeking to display their prowess. The man's students gathered to watch, confident in their master's superiority. Musashi arrived alone, carrying his typical wooden sword. His opponent bowed, then assumed his stance, right hand holding his katana, left hand holding his wakizashi, both weapons moving in coordinated patterns designed to overwhelm an opponent with multiple angles of attack. It was impressive, elegant, complex. Musashi watched calmly. Then he asked a question. "You fight with 2 swords?" The samurai nodded proudly. "The 2-sword style allows me to attack and defend simultaneously. It is superior to the single-sword technique." Musashi considered this. "Then answer me this. When you face an enemy, do you intend to kill him with your right hand or your left?" The samurai hesitated. "Both, either, whichever the situation demands." Musashi shook his head slowly. "That is why you will lose. You have divided your intention. You are prepared to strike with either hand, which means you are not fully committed to striking with any hand. Your mind is split. Your focus is fractured." Before the samurai could respond, Musashi moved. One step forward, one strike, direct, decisive, total. The wooden sword struck the samurai's wrist, the right one his primary hand, with such precision that the katana fell from his grip. Before he could compensate with his left sword, Musashi's next strike was already descending toward his head. The samurai dropped his remaining weapon and conceded defeat. The entire encounter lasted less than 10 seconds. Musashi bowed and left without elaborating. But his philosophy was clear. The warrior who tries to do two things at once accomplishes neither. The warrior who focuses on one thing completely becomes unstoppable. This is the fifth discipline. Divided attention creates divided results. Total focus creates total victory. The principle, diffusion, is death. The modern world has declared war on your attention. Every notification, every email, every message, every app is engineered to fragment your focus into smaller and smaller pieces. You're encouraged to multitask, to keep multiple projects active, to maintain dozens of relationships simultaneously, to consume content constantly. And the result is that you're doing many things poorly instead of one thing exceptionally. Musashi understood something that most people today have forgotten. Your power is proportional to your focus. Spread your attention across 10 targets, and each receives 10% of your capability. Direct your entire attention toward one target, and it receives 100%. This isn't about being narrow-minded. It's about understanding that excellence requires concentration, that mastery emerges from sustained attention. That breakthrough happens when you stop dividing yourself and commit fully to the thing that matters most. Think about Musashi in that duel. His opponent had two swords, which theoretically gave him more options, more flexibility, more potential attacks. But those two swords also meant his attention was divided between them, his commitment was split, his intention was fractured. Musashi had one sword, one intention, one focus: strike the target. When the moment came, there was no hesitation, no internal debate about which weapon to use or which technique to employ. There was only action, complete, committed, devastating. This is what focus creates. The ability to act with totality, to bring everything you are to bear on a single point, to concentrate your force so completely that resistance becomes irrelevant. The modern battlefield, where focus wins. Let's examine where your scattered attention is destroying your potential right now. Scenario 1, the entrepreneur with 10 ideas. You're bursting with ideas: a software product, a consulting business, an e-commerce store, a content platform, a coaching program. All of them are good ideas. Any of them could work. So you're working on all of them simultaneously. A little time here, a little time there, keeping all the balls in the air. And none of them are succeeding, because you're not giving any single idea the sustained, focused attention required to bring it to life. You're spreading yourself so thin that every project gets your leftover energy, your divided attention, your partial commitment. Musashi would look at your 10 projects and ask, which one are you trying to kill? Because that's what focus is, killing the enemy. And you can't kill 10 enemies simultaneously. You have to pick one, commit fully, strike with totality, and only then move to the next target. The successful entrepreneurs you admire didn't build empires by working on 10 things at once. They built one thing exceptionally well. Then, from that foundation of success, they built the next thing, and the next. But first they focused, completely, ruthlessly, to the exclusion of everything else. What are the 9 projects you need to kill so you can give 100% to the one that matters most? Scenario 2, the professional who's keeping options open. You're early in your career. You don't want to specialize too soon because specialization feels like closing doors. So you're building general skills, exploring different industries, keeping yourself flexible for whatever opportunity might arise. And as a result, you're not exceptional at anything. You're competent at many things, which means you're easily replaceable. The market doesn't reward generalists, it rewards specialists. People who are so focused on one domain that they become the obvious choice when that specific problem needs solving. Musashi didn't train with every weapon. He mastered the sword. One weapon, complete mastery, and that mastery made him legendary. Your career works the same way. The person who's pretty good at marketing, sales, design, and coding will lose to the person who's exceptional at one of those things every time. Because exceptional skill comes from focused attention over time, from 10,000 hours spent on one craft, from refusing to be distracted by the dozen other interesting paths you could have taken. This doesn't mean you're stuck forever. Musashi eventually explored other arts, painting, calligraphy, philosophy, but he did so after he had mastered his primary discipline, not before. What skill are you refusing to commit to because you're afraid of narrowing your options? Scenario 3, the parent who's everywhere and nowhere. You're at your kid's soccer game, but your phone is out, responding to work emails. Your body is present, but your attention is elsewhere. You're at dinner with your partner, but you're thinking about the presentation tomorrow. You're nodding at the right moments, but you're not actually listening. You're in a meeting at work, but you're mentally replaying the argument you had this morning. You're physically there, but your mind is miles away. This is how you lose everything while appearing to do everything. Your kid feels ignored even though you showed up. Your partner feels distant even though you're sitting across from them. Your work suffers even though you're putting in the hours. Because presence without attention is absence. Musashi didn't win duels by being near his opponent. He won by being completely, totally, absolutely present in that moment. His mind wasn't wandering to the next fight or the last one. It was here, now, on this opponent, this strike, this instant. Your relationships require the same focus. Your work requires it. Your life requires it. You cannot be everywhere at once, but you can be fully where you are when you're there. Where are you physically present but mentally absent, and what is that costing you? The practice reclaiming your focus. Musashi didn't achieve his legendary focus by accident. He trained it deliberately, relentlessly, until it became his natural state. You can develop the same capacity. Exercise 1, the single-tasking sprint. For the next week, practice this. When you work, only work. No email, no phone, no music with lyrics, no browser tabs for quick research. One task, one window, one focus. Set a timer for 90 minutes. During that time, you do only the one thing you sat down to do. Nothing else exists. Most people have forgotten what this feels like. They've been multitasking for so long that single tasking feels unnatural, even uncomfortable. Their brain keeps reaching for distractions like an addict reaching for a fix. That discomfort is proof you need this practice. Your focus muscle has atrophied. This exercise rebuilds it. You'll be shocked at how much you accomplish in 90 minutes of genuine focus compared to 4 hours of fragmented attention. Exercise 2, the priority purge. Make a list of everything you're currently trying to accomplish. Every project, goal, commitment, obligation, everything. Now cut the list in half, then cut it in half again. You should be left with 2 to 3 things that actually matter. Everything else is noise. This is painful because it requires you to admit that you can't do everything. That pursuing 20 goals means achieving none. That focus requires sacrifice. But Musashi would tell you, the warrior who tries to master every weapon ends up mediocre with all of them. The warrior who masters one weapon becomes legendary. What are you willing to not do so you can do the things that matter exceptionally well? Exercise 3, the presence practice. Once a day, practice being completely present for one interaction or activity. Not the whole day. That's too much to start. Just one. One meal where you taste every bite and speak with full attention. One conversation where you listen completely without planning your response. One workout where you feel every movement, every breath. One moment with your child where nothing else exists. This isn't meditation. It's training. Training your mind to give itself fully to what's in front of you instead of scattering across what was and what might be. Musashi could focus so completely in a duel that hours felt like seconds. He achieved this through practice, through returning his wandering attention to the present moment 10,000 times until it learned to stay there naturally. You can develop the same capacity, but like any skill, it requires practice, intentional, repeated, disciplined practice. The wisdom, Musashi's lessons on focus. Musashi's writings are filled with insights about the necessity of complete focus. Here are the principles that matter most. There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within. Translation: focus is an internal discipline. The world will always offer distractions. Your job is to develop the internal capacity to resist them. External tools and techniques are useless if you lack internal focus. Do nothing which is of no use. Translation: every action that doesn't serve your primary objective dilutes your power. Eliminate ruthlessly. Focus requires saying no to everything that isn't essential. When you have attained the way of strategy, there will be nothing that you cannot understand. Translation: deep focus in one domain creates insight that transfers to others. Mastery in one area teaches you how to master anything. But you must go deep first before you can go wide. The primary thing when you take a sword in your hands is your intention to cut the enemy. Translation: clarity of purpose focuses attention. When you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish, focus becomes natural. Confusion scatters attention. Clarity concentrates it. The integration: focus in daily life. Focus isn't something you achieve once. It's something you practice every moment of every day. Here's what it looks like. In your mornings, you don't check your phone immediately upon waking. You don't flood your mind with other people's priorities before you've clarified your own. You start with intention, deciding what matters most today, and you build your day around that. In your work, you batch similar tasks together. You eliminate unnecessary meetings. You turn off notifications. You create environments that support focus rather than fragment it. You understand that your attention is your most valuable resource and you protect it accordingly. In your relationships, you put your phone in another room during dinner. You make eye contact during conversations. You listen not to respond, but to understand. You give people the gift of your complete presence, which is rarer and more valuable than any material gift. In your learning, you finish one book before starting another. You master one skill before moving to the next. You go deep instead of wide. You understand that superficial knowledge of many things is less valuable than profound knowledge of one thing. In your rest. When you rest, you actually rest. You don't relax by scrolling mindlessly, which is just fragmented attention pointed at nothing important. You recover fully so you can focus completely when it's time to work. The warning: when focus becomes tunnel vision. There's a shadow side to focus that must be acknowledged. It can become blindness. When you're so focused on one target that you miss everything around it. When you're so committed to one approach that you can't see alternatives. When you're so locked onto one goal that you destroy everything else in pursuit of it. This isn't focus, this is obsession, and obsession creates brittleness. Musashi was focused, but he was also aware. He focused completely on his opponent during the duel, but he also perceived the environment, the terrain, the light, the wind. His focus was concentrated but not narrowed to the point of blindness. The difference is this. Focus means giving your full attention to what matters most right now. Tunnel vision means giving your attention to one thing to the exclusion of everything else, even when other things need attention. A surgeon focuses completely during surgery, but when surgery is done, they shift their focus to family, to rest, to other aspects of life. They don't neglect everything except surgery. That's healthy focus. Complete presence in the moment, with the flexibility to shift that presence when the moment changes. If you find yourself sacrificing your health for your career, your relationships for your ambitions, your values for your goals, that's not focus. That's imbalance, masquerading as discipline. Musashi mastered the sword, but he also painted, wrote poetry, lived a full life. His focus was intense, but not all-consuming. Know the difference. Focus intensely, but know when to shift your focus to what else matters. The single strike that changes everything. In every meaningful endeavor, there's a moment, a single point of maximum leverage, where everything hinges on whether you can bring your full force to bear. In a duel, it's the strike that ends the fight. In business, it's the product launch or the crucial pitch. In relationships, it's the conversation that determines everything. In your life, it's the decision that creates all other decisions. Most people miss these moments because their attention is scattered. They're so busy juggling multiple concerns that when the critical moment arrives, they can't marshal their full capability. They're divided, diluted, diminished. Musashi never missed these moments, because when they arrived, he was completely, absolutely, totally present. His entire being, his skill, his awareness, his will, concentrated on that single point. One target, one strike, total commitment. This is what focus creates. The ability to recognize the moment that matters and bring everything you are to bear on it. You face these moments more often than you realize. The conversation where you could ask for what you really want. The hour where you could make significant progress on what matters most. The moment where you could be fully present with someone you love. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Patience, the Long Game. The master strategist, Sun Tzu. The siege had lasted 3 months. Sun Tzu's army surrounded the city, cutting off supply lines, blocking reinforcements, waiting. His generals grew restless. The soldiers grumbled. Some suggested a direct assault. The walls were strong, but they had the numbers. Others proposed building siege engines, battering rams, towers. Sun Tzu refused every suggestion. "We wait," he said simply. "But General," one commander protested, "our own supplies are running low. The men are losing morale. If we wait much longer, we may have to retreat." Sun Tzu smiled slightly. The enemy's supplies are running lower. Their morale is breaking faster, and they have nowhere to retreat to. We are not waiting aimlessly. We are waiting for them to defeat themselves. Inside the city, exactly what Sun Tzu predicted was happening. Food stores dwindled, water became scarce, arguments broke out among the leaders. Some wanted to surrender, others insisted they could hold out. But as days turned to weeks turned to months, the will to resist crumbled faster than any wall ever could. On the 91st day of the siege, the city gates opened. Not because Sun Tzu's army had breached them, but because the defenders no longer had the strength or the unity to keep them closed. Sun Tzu's army marched in without losing a single soldier in combat. The victory was total, the cost was minimal, and it was all won through one discipline that most generals lacked: patience. He understood something profound. The fastest way to victory is often the slowest, because impatience causes mistakes, and mistakes cause defeat. This is the 6th discipline. In a world obsessed with speed, patience is a superpower. The principle: time is a weapon. We live in the age of instant gratification, instant messages, instant delivery, instant results. The culture tells you that if something takes time, you're doing it wrong. But Sun Tzu would tell you the opposite. If you're unwilling to invest time, you'll never build anything that lasts. Patience is not passivity. It's not sitting back and hoping things work out. It's the active discipline of doing the right thing and trusting that time will compound your advantages while exposing your opponent's weaknesses. Think about Sun Tzu at that siege. He could have attacked immediately. He had the numbers. He might have won. But he would have lost soldiers, spent resources, and the outcome would have been uncertain. Instead, he waited. And while waiting, several things happened. His enemy's resources depleted while his remained stable. His enemy's unity fractured while his army's discipline held. His enemy's fear grew while his confidence remained solid. Time itself became his ally instead of his burden. This is what patience creates: the ability to let time work for you instead of feeling like it's working against you. Most people lack this discipline. They need results now. They need validation now. They need proof now. And so they make impulsive decisions, abandon plans too early, and burn bridges they'll later wish they'd preserved. Sun Tzu won wars by having a longer time horizon than his opponents. While they thought in days, he thought in months. While they needed immediate victory, he was willing to wait for inevitable victory. Your life works the same way. The person willing to think in years while everyone else thinks in weeks has an insurmountable advantage. The modern battlefield, where patience wins. Let's examine where your impatience is sabotaging your success right now. Scenario 1. The business that dies at the 1-year mark. You launched your business. You gave it everything for 6 months, maybe a year. You hustled, networked, created content, built products. And the results weren't what you hoped for. Revenue was modest, growth was slow, success felt impossibly far away. So you quit, or you pivoted to something entirely new. Because clearly, if it was going to work, it would have worked by now. This is where most businesses die, not from bad ideas, from premature abandonment. Because here's what you didn't see. You were 3 months away from the breakthrough, 6 months away from the tipping point. You were building momentum invisibly, creating compounding advantages that hadn't manifested yet. Sun Tzu would have looked at your 1-year timeline and laughed, not mockingly, but because he understood that meaningful victories take time. The foundation you build in year 1 creates the success you see in year 3. Most businesses that succeed weren't profitable in year 1. Most overnight successes took 10 years to build. Most sudden breakthroughs were preceded by years of invisible progress. The question is, can you stay in the game long enough for time to work in your favor? Can you keep showing up when results are slow? Can you keep building when no one's watching? Can you maintain discipline when immediate rewards are absent? That's patience, and it's the difference between the businesses that make it and the ones that die just before the breakthrough. Scenario 2. The relationship you're trying to force. You met someone. The chemistry is there. The potential is obvious. So you're pushing for commitment, for definitions, for clarity about where this is going. And the more you push, the more they pull away. Because you're trying to compress a natural timeline into an artificial deadline. You're impatient for the outcome, so you're trying to force it into existence. Sun Tzu would tell you, when you force a siege prematurely, you create unnecessary resistance. But when you allow time to work, defenses lower naturally. Relationships have rhythms. Trust builds over time. Intimacy develops through shared experience. Connection deepens through patience, not pressure. The person trying to force someone to love them creates distance. The person willing to let love develop naturally creates space for it to grow. This doesn't mean being passive or unclear about what you want. It means understanding that some things cannot be rushed, that trying to accelerate natural processes often destroys them. Seeds don't grow faster when you dig them up to check on them. They grow when you plant them, water them, and wait. What relationship are you killing with impatience? Scenario 3. The skill you abandoned too soon. You started learning something new, a language, an instrument, a technical skill. You were excited at first. Then you hit the plateau. The phase where progress becomes invisible, where practice feels repetitive, where improvement is measured in millimeters instead of miles. So you quit. You told yourself it wasn't for you, that you didn't have the talent, that it was taking too long. But the truth is simpler. You lacked patience for the messy middle. Every skill worth having has a phase where progress is invisible, where you're putting in the work but not seeing results, where your practice feels like it's doing nothing. This is where most people quit, and it's exactly where Sun Tzu would tell you to stay, because on the other side of that plateau is breakthrough. But breakthrough only comes to those willing to endure the tedium, to those willing to practice when practice feels pointless, to those willing to trust that time compounds even when they can't see it happening. Malcolm Gladwell's famous 10,000-hour rule isn't about talent. It's about patience. It's about having the discipline to keep going when immediate results are absent. What skill did you abandon that you would have mastered if you'd just been willing to wait? The practice cultivating strategic patience. Sun Tzu's patience wasn't innate. It was cultivated through discipline, philosophy, and long-term thinking. You can develop the same capacity. Exercise 1, the 5-year vision. Most people live in a compressed timeline. They think in days, weeks, maybe months. Their decisions are optimized for immediate results. This exercise expands your time horizon. Write down where you want to be in 5 years. Not vaguely, but specifically. What do you want to have built? What skills do you want to have mastered? What relationships do you want to have deepened? Then work backward. What would you need to accomplish in year 4 to make year 5 possible? What about year 3, year 2, year 1? Finally, ask, what needs to happen this month to start building toward that 5-year vision? When you think in 5-year blocks, the setbacks of this week become insignificant. The slow progress of this month becomes acceptable. The invisible work of this quarter becomes essential. Patience becomes natural when you're playing a longer game than everyone else. Exercise 2, the Patience Journal. Every time you feel impatient, in traffic, in a line, waiting for results, wanting immediate gratification, write down the situation and what you're feeling. Then ask, what would patience look like here? Not as a moral question, but as a strategic one. What advantage might you gain by waiting? What mistake might you avoid by not rushing? What would happen if you gave this more time? This exercise trains your brain to see patience as powerful instead of passive. To recognize that the discomfort of waiting is often less costly than the consequences of rushing. Over time, you'll notice your default response shifting. Impatience will still arise, it's human, but you'll become better at overriding it with strategic thinking. Exercise 3, the long game commitment. Choose one thing, a project, a skill, a relationship, and commit to it for an unusually long timeline. Not until it works, or until I see results, but for a fixed period regardless of outcomes. For example, I will write for 1 hour every day for 1 year, regardless of whether anyone reads it. Or I will practice this instrument for 30 minutes daily for 2 years, regardless of how slowly I progress. Or I will invest consistently for 5 years, regardless of market fluctuations. The commitment itself is the practice. Because patience isn't about waiting passively. It's about doing the right things consistently over a long enough timeline that results become inevitable. Sun Tzu didn't sit outside the city gates hoping they would open. He actively maintained the siege every single day until the enemy had no choice but to surrender. That's strategic patience, consistent action, long timeline, inevitable outcome. The wisdom, Sun Tzu's lessons on patience. Sun Tzu's philosophy is saturated with insights about the power of patience. Here are the principles that matter most. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Translation: patient strategists create the conditions for victory before engaging. Impatient warriors engage before conditions favor them and then hope to somehow win anyway. One approaches war with preparation, the other with wishful thinking. There is no instance of a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. Translation: while patience is powerful, it must be strategic, not indefinite. Patient waiting for the right moment is wise. Prolonged conflict with no resolution is wasteful. Know the difference. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. Translation: patience includes knowing when not to act. The impatient warrior fights every battle. The patient warrior fights only the battles that matter, at the moment when victory is assured. Opportunities multiply as they are seized. Translation: patience creates the foundation for recognizing and acting on opportunities. Impatient action exhausts resources and attention. Patient preparation positions you to seize multiple opportunities when they arise. The integration, patience in daily life. Patience isn't reserved for military sieges. It's available to you in every domain of your life right now. In your career, you don't demand immediate promotions. You build the track record that makes promotion inevitable. You invest in skills before you need them. You cultivate relationships before you need favors. You play the long game while your peers scramble for short-term wins. In your finances, you don't chase get-rich-quick schemes. You invest consistently, trust compound interest, and let decades do the heavy lifting. You understand that wealth is built slowly through discipline, not quickly through luck. In your health, you don't expect six-pack abs after 2 weeks at the gym. You commit to sustainable habits, trust the process, and let years of consistency create the body you want. You know that shortcuts lead to injuries and burnout. In your parenting, you don't expect your 5-year-old to behave like an adult. You teach the same lessons repeatedly, trust that repetition builds character, and accept that your children will understand the value of what you're teaching them years from now, not today. In your conflicts, you don't need to win every argument immediately. You can let someone be wrong without correcting them. You can let tension exist without resolving it right this second. You trust that time often resolves what immediate intervention would escalate. The warning when patience becomes procrastination. There's a shadow side to patience. It can become an excuse for inaction. Some people use being patient as cover for being afraid. They're not strategically waiting for the right moment. They're indefinitely avoiding the hard thing they need to do. Sun Tzu waited outside the city walls, but he was actively waiting, maintaining the siege, gathering intelligence, preparing for eventual entry. His patience was strategic, not passive. If you find yourself being patient about starting the business, having the conversation, making the change, ask yourself honestly, am I waiting strategically or am I avoiding fearfully? Strategic patience has a plan and a timeline. It knows what conditions it's waiting for. It's preparing during the wait. Procrastination disguised as patience has neither. It's just hoping that someday, somehow, things will be easier. They won't be. Sun Tzu knew when to wait and when to strike. If you're only ever waiting, you're not being patient. You're being paralyzed. Know the difference. The siege you're laying. Right now, there's something you're building, a career, a business, a body of work, a relationship, a life. And it's not happening as fast as you want. The results aren't as dramatic as you hoped. The progress feels invisible. The timeline feels unbearable. You're tempted to abandon it, to try something else, to find a faster path, to give up because clearly it's not working. But Sun Tzu would ask you, how long have you been at this? Months, a year, 2 years? And then he'd tell you, meaningful victories take longer than that. The walls you're trying to breach won't fall in weeks. But if you maintain the siege, if you show up consistently, if you don't give up, if you trust the process, those walls will fall. Not because you forced them, but because time worked in your favor. The enemy inside those walls, doubt, resistance, obstacles, has finite resources. Your patience outlasts them if you let it. But only if you stay. Only if you keep showing up. Only if you're willing to play a longer game than they can sustain. Most people lose not because they weren't capable, but because they weren't willing to wait long enough for their capability to manifest. Don't be most people. Be Sun Tzu standing outside those walls, calm and certain, knowing that the victory is inevitable if he just doesn't leave. The question isn't whether you can win. The question is whether you can wait long enough for time to deliver the victory that your impatience would destroy. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years, however long it takes. Because on the other side of patient persistence is every meaningful thing you've ever wanted to build. But you have to stay long enough to see it. Chapter 7. The Discipline of Decisive Action. The Point of No Return. The master strategist, Alexander the Great. The army stood at the edge of the Hellespont, the narrow strait that separated Europe from Asia. Behind them lay Macedonia, everything familiar, everything known. Ahead lay Persia, the largest empire the world had ever seen, with armies that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Alexander was 22 years old. His generals were nervous. This was the moment when plans became reality, when theory met practice, when everything they'd prepared for would be tested. Some suggested waiting, gathering more intelligence, building more ships, securing their rear. Alexander listened. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He ordered his ships burned. Not most of them, not some of them, all of them. His generals protested immediately. How will we retreat if things go wrong? How will we resupply? How will we escape if we're overwhelmed? Alexander's response was simple. We're not retreating. We're not escaping. We're going forward until we win or die. There is no third option. He crossed into Asia that day with an army that had no way home, except through victory. Every soldier knew that hesitation meant death. Every commander understood that the only path was forward. And that impossible, audacious, reckless decision changed history. Because when you remove the possibility of retreat, something shifts in the human mind. Doubt evaporates. Hesitation disappears. You stop calculating odds and start creating outcomes. Alexander conquered Persia not because he had the largest army, but because he had total commitment. Because he understood something most people never learn. The moment of decision is the moment of power. Everything before it is just preparation. Everything after it is just execution. This is the seventh discipline: hesitation kills, decisive action wins. The principle: commitment creates reality. You've been preparing, planning, gathering information, considering options, weighing pros and cons, waiting for certainty. And while you've been preparing, the opportunity has been dying. Because here's what most people don't understand. Preparation has diminishing returns. At some point, more planning doesn't increase your chances of success. It just delays the moment when you find out if you can succeed at all. Alexander could have spent another year training his army, another year gathering intelligence, another year building alliances, and at the end of that year, Persia would still have been the larger force. The odds would still have been against him. The additional preparation wouldn't have changed the fundamentals. It would just have postponed the moment of truth. So he burned his ships, he made retreat impossible. He transformed his army from people who might succeed into people who must succeed. This is what decisive action does. It collapses possibility into reality. It ends the paralysis of infinite options and creates the clarity of one direction. Most people live in the space before decision. They keep their options open. They hedge their bets. They maintain escape routes. And in doing so, they guarantee mediocre results. Because when you can retreat, you will. When you have a backup plan, you'll use it. When you've left yourself an exit, you'll take it at the first sign of difficulty. But when you burn the ships, when you commit so completely that there's no turning back, you unleash a level of resourcefulness, creativity, and determination that doesn't exist when retreat is an option. The modern battlefield, where decisive action wins. Let's examine where your inability to commit is keeping you trapped in mediocrity. Scenario 1. The career you're tolerating. You've been thinking about quitting your job for 2 years, maybe longer. You've been exploring other options, updating your resume, having quiet conversations with recruiters, but you haven't actually quit. Because what if the new opportunity doesn't work out? What if you make less money? What if you regret it? So you stay, miserable but safe, dreaming of change but paralyzed by uncertainty. Alexander would look at your situation and ask one question: what are you trying to accomplish? If your objective is to stay comfortable and avoid risk, then staying makes sense. But if your objective is to build a meaningful career, to do work that matters, to spend your limited time on Earth doing something you don't resent, then staying is the opposite of strategy. It's slow suicide disguised as patience. Decisive action means this: you set a date, you give notice, you burn the ships, you commit to the new path so completely that the old path is no longer available. And yes, it might not work out. The new job might be terrible. The business might fail. The risk might cost you. But here's what you don't see. The cost of staying is higher. Because every year you stay in a job you hate is a year you didn't spend building something better. Every month you tolerate mediocrity is a month you could have spent creating excellence. The question isn't whether the leap is risky. The question is whether staying is riskier. Most people discover too late that it was. Scenario 2. The relationship that's half committed. You've been dating someone for years, or living together, or engaged for so long that your friends have stopped asking when the wedding is. But you haven't actually committed. Not really. You're still keeping one foot out the door, still evaluating, still waiting to be sure. And your partner can feel it. They can sense that you're holding back, that you're auditioning them for a role rather than choosing them as a partner. And that hesitation, that inability to fully commit, is poisoning the relationship more effectively than any single conflict could. Because relationships can survive disagreement. They can survive hardship. They can survive almost anything except the feeling that one person isn't truly committed. Alexander knew that an army that thinks it might retreat fights differently than an army that knows it can't. The first conserves energy, the second gives everything. Your relationship is the same way. When you're fully committed, when you've burned the ships, when you've chosen this person completely, the relationship transforms. Problems that seemed insurmountable become challenges you face together. Doubts that felt overwhelming become irrelevant because you've already decided. But when you're perpetually evaluating whether this is the right person, you're not building anything. You're just prolonging the decision. Decisive action in relationships means this: you choose completely, without reservation, without backup plans, without exit strategies. You commit to this person, to building this life together, to facing whatever comes as a team, or you end it, cleanly, honestly, so both of you can move forward instead of existing in perpetual limbo. But what you cannot do, what destroys both people, is remain indefinitely in the space before decision. Scenario 3. The creative work you're perfecting forever. You've been working on something for months, maybe years, a book, a business, a product, a piece of art, and it's almost ready. Just needs a little more work, a little more polish, a little more time to get it exactly right. So you keep refining, keep editing, keep preparing to launch. Meanwhile, the world moves on. The market shifts, the opportunity window closes, and your perfect creation dies in obscurity because you never released it. This is the trap of the perpetual perfectionist. They believe that more preparation increases their chances of success. But past a certain point, it doesn't. Past a certain point, more preparation is just procrastination disguised as diligence. Alexander could have spent his entire life preparing to invade Persia and never invaded. He could have trained his soldiers more, gathered more allies, waited for better conditions. Instead, he crossed. And he learned more in the first week of actual combat than he could have learned in a year of theoretical preparation. Your creative work is the same. You will learn more from launching imperfectly than from polishing endlessly. You will discover what works by testing it in the real world, not by perfecting it in isolation. Decisive action means you ship, you publish, you launch, you release the thing into the world, ready or not. Not because it's perfect, but because perfect is the enemy of done, and done is the only version that can succeed. The practice cultivating decisive action. Alexander's ability to act decisively wasn't recklessness, it was a cultivated discipline. You can develop the same capacity. Exercise 1, the 72-hour rule. For the next month, practice this. When you identify a decision that needs to be made, give yourself 72 hours. Not to gather more information endlessly, but to gather what you can gather, then decide. No extensions, no, just one more thing to consider. 72 hours, then commitment. This exercise trains you to make decisions with incomplete information, which is the only type of information that ever exists. It forces you to develop confidence in your judgment rather than seeking external certainty that will never come. Most decisions aren't improved by additional months of consideration. They're improved by being made and then executed well. Exercise 2, the burnt ship exercise. Identify one thing in your life where you're keeping an exit strategy that's preventing full commitment. Maybe it's a backup career plan that's keeping you from fully investing in your business. Maybe it's a just-in-case relationship that's preventing you from committing to the person you're with. Maybe it's a safety net that's keeping you from taking necessary risks. Then burn it, deliberately, publicly if possible. Tell your boss you're leaving, with no fallback position lined up. Tell your partner you're all in, no more hedging. Quit the thing you've been doing just in case, and commit fully to the thing you actually want. This is terrifying. That's the point. The terror is evidence that you've been operating from a place of safety rather than commitment. And safety, while comfortable, produces mediocre results. Exercise 3, the decision journal. Start tracking your decisions, not the outcomes, the speed of the decision. How long did it take you to decide? What were you waiting for? What additional information were you hoping to gather? And looking back, Would a faster decision have changed anything? You'll discover a pattern. Most of your delayed decisions weren't improved by the delay. They were just postponed by fear, perfectionism, or the hope that certainty would somehow materialize. This awareness itself creates change. When you see the cost of hesitation clearly, decisive action becomes easier. The wisdom, Alexander's lessons on decisive action. Alexander's life, though short, demonstrated profound insights about the power of commitment. Here are the principles that matter most. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Translation: decisive leadership transforms ordinary people into extraordinary forces. Your commitment creates commitment in others. Your hesitation creates hesitation in others. People follow those who have decided, not those who are still deciding. There is nothing impossible to him who will try. Translation: action reveals what's possible. Inaction guarantees impossibility. You discover capability by committing, not by contemplating. Remember, upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. Translation: your decision to commit or hesitate affects everyone around you. In teams, in families, in organizations, decisive action by one person creates momentum for everyone. Hesitation by one person creates doubt for everyone. Fortune favors the bold. Translation: not because the universe rewards courage, but because decisive action creates opportunities that hesitation can never access. Bold people try more, fail more, learn more, and therefore succeed more. Cautious people die with their potential intact. The integration, decisive action in daily life. Decisive action isn't reserved for military campaigns. It's available to you in every area of your life, every single day. In your mornings, you don't hit snooze, you don't negotiate with yourself. The alarm rings, you get up. One decision, executed immediately, that sets the tone for your entire day. In your communication. When you need to have a difficult conversation, you have it now. Not when the time is right. Not after I've thought about it more. Now, today, this morning. Because delay doesn't improve difficult conversations. It just makes them worse. In your finances. When you identify a necessary expense or investment, you make it. You don't deliberate for months about whether to hire the coach, take the course, or buy the equipment. You decide quickly and move forward. In your relationships. When you know something needs to be said, an apology, a confession, a commitment, a boundary, you say it, not perfectly, not with ideal timing, but decisively, completely, without reservation. In your work. When you identify what needs to be done, you do it. You don't wait for permission, for perfect conditions, for someone else to take the lead. You commit to the action and then execute it with totality. The warning. When decisiveness becomes impulsiveness. There's a shadow side to decisive action that must be acknowledged. It can become recklessness. Some people confuse speed with wisdom. They make decisions quickly, without adequate thought, then defend their impulsiveness as being decisive. That's not what Alexander did. He didn't burn his ships on a whim. He made that decision after careful consideration of his objectives, his resources, his enemies, and the psychology of his troops. The decision was fast, but it wasn't thoughtless. That's the distinction. Decisive action is rapid execution after adequate reflection. Impulsiveness is rapid execution without reflection. How do you know the difference? Ask yourself. Do I understand what I'm trying to accomplish? Do I have enough information to make a reasonable choice? Am I deciding based on strategy or based on emotion? Will I regret this decision if I give it 72 hours? If you can answer these questions clearly, act decisively. If you can't, you need more clarity before you commit. Alexander spent years preparing before he invaded Persia. But when the moment came to cross, he didn't hesitate. He didn't second guess. He committed totally and immediately. That's the balance. Preparation before decision. Totality after decision. No extended hesitation in between. The ships you're keeping. Right now, there's something you need to commit to. A decision you've been avoiding. A choice you've been postponing. a leap you've been contemplating but not taking. And you're keeping your ships, just in case, just to be safe, just so you have a way out if things go wrong. But those ships, those backup plans, those exit strategies, those safety nets are the very things preventing you from succeeding. Because when the going gets hard, and it will, you'll retreat to them. When doubt creeps in, and it will, you'll question your commitment. When fear appears, and it will, you'll use those ships to escape instead of fighting through. Alexander understood something profound. The possibility of retreat guarantees retreat. The option to quit guarantees quitting. The backup plan guarantees you'll use it. So he removed the option. He made success the only possibility. He transformed a group of soldiers who might win into an army that had to win. And they did. Against impossible odds, across thousands of miles, for over a decade. Because there was never a moment when retreat was possible. That's the power of decisive action, not that it makes success easy, but that it makes success necessary. So here's your discipline. Identify the ships you're keeping, the backup plans, the exit strategies, the just-in-case options, and burn them, not literally, necessarily, but functionally. Remove the possibility of retreat, close the escape routes, make commitment the only option. Tell the people who need to know, make public declarations, create accountability that makes backing out painful. Then step forward, completely, totally, with the certainty that you will find a way forward or die trying, because those are now your only two options. This is terrifying. That's how you know it's right. Because comfort keeps you safe, but commitment makes you powerful. And you've been safe long enough. The crossing you must make. The shore behind you represents everything familiar, everything you know, everything comfortable. It's the life you've been living, the person you've been being, the choices you've been making. The shore ahead represents everything you want to become, everything you're capable of, everything you dream about but haven't yet achieved. And between them is the strait, the gap, the space of uncertainty where you don't know if you'll succeed. Most people stand on that shore for their entire lives, looking across, imagining, preparing, hoping that someday they'll feel ready enough, certain enough, brave enough to cross. They die on that shore, surrounded by their ships, having never crossed. Alexander crossed at 22, and he conquered the world. Not because he was certain of success, but because he was committed to finding out. That's the final discipline. That's what all the others have been preparing you for. Detachment gave you clarity about what matters. Momentum gave you the courage to start moving. Timing taught you when to strike. Adaptation showed you how to adjust when conditions change. Focus concentrated your power on what matters most. Patience gave you the endurance to stay in the game. And now, decisive action asks one final question. Are you ready to burn your ships? Are you ready to commit so completely that retreat becomes impossible? To choose so definitively that doubt has nowhere to live? To act so decisively that hesitation dies forever? The world doesn't need another person who almost tried, who thought about it, who planned to someday. The world needs people who cross, who commit, who act. Not perfectly, not without fear, but decisively, completely, irrevocably. The ships are waiting. The decision is yours. But know this. Every day you wait is a day you spend on the shore watching others conquer the territories you dreamed about. Alexander didn't wait. He crossed. And the world was never the same. Your world is waiting for you to do the same. So ask yourself one final question. What ships do you need to burn today? And then, before doubt can answer, before fear can intervene, before comfort can seduce you back to safety, burn them. Cross the strait. Commit to the conquest. Become the person who acted instead of the person who almost did. Your territory is waiting, but only decisive action will take you there. The time for strategy is over. The time for action is now.